Hello and welcome back to Deep Sleep Creeps YouTube channel. Today we're going to be listening to 3 more horror stories. If you enjoyed listening to it, please consider commenting and subscribing. So get comfortable and let's begin. This eerie encounter etched itself into my memory when I was just 7 years old. It was the cusp of a new school year, the excitement of the first day looming ahead. But before that, we had the chance to meet our teachers. That day started like any other school event, bustling with parents mingling, kids running about with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. Amidst the crowd, my parents approached my new teacher, engrossed in conversations about the upcoming semester. I found myself quickly becoming bored with the adult chatter, and my curiosity led me to explore the trophy cases nearby. It was during this brief wander that my path crossed with the stranger who would forever alter the course of that day. The man's approach was friendly, his expression warm as he inquired about my name and teacher for the year. I answered him with the politeness I'd been taught, a reflection of the respect I was expected to show any adult. As he engaged me in conversation, I couldn't help but feel a little proud that an adult was interested in talking to me. However, it wasn't long before he skillfully maneuvered the conversation away from small talk. He began describing a secret room within the elementary school, a place where the cool kids would retreat to when they needed a break from the watchful eyes of teachers. The notion of a secret hideaway fascinated me, igniting my imagination and temporarily sidelining common sense. Despite my love for Nancy Drew and detective stories, I should have recognized the oddity of the situation. Yet, the allure of a hidden room blurred my judgment. The man's grip on my hand tightened as he led me down the hallway, my heart racing with excitement. With each step, his grasp grew more restrictive, and I began to sense something was amiss. My excitement took a sudden plunge into confusion when he led me outside. I voiced my puzzlement, only to be met with his explanation that the secret room was accessible through a concealed entrance on the playground. At this point, he hastened his pace, his grip like a vice on my hand. As we neared a car, my unease intensified, and I came to a halt, tugging on his grip with growing resistance. As the realization of danger sank in, I was propelled into action, the instinctual response of any child in peril. I screamed at the top of my lungs, kicked, and bit with all the might my small frame could muster. It became a battle of persistence, a struggle between my survival instincts and his intent. Then, in a moment of desperation, he scooped me up into his arms, likely aiming to subdue my resistance. Yet fate intervened at that very moment. The door burst open, revealing a flood of parents and teachers who had recognized the perilous scene unfolding. As their eyes locked onto the chaos, the man dropped me in a hurry and fled the scene. The rapidity of his departure only cemented the gravity of the situation. Something sinister had been afoot. The teachers, my parents among them, rushed to my side, their faces a mixture of shock and concern. One teacher in particular managed to jot down his license plate, which ultimately played a pivotal role in his subsequent arrest. A short time later, the stranger was apprehended, his intentions laid bare for all to see. In the aftermath, I was fortunate. Physically, I bore only minor scrapes and bruises, a testament to the struggle that had ensued. Emotionally, however, the incident left its mark. As my parents held me close, their hugs felt like a lifeline. My mum's embrace, tighter than ever, conveyed a sense of security I hadn't fully understood until that moment. The events of that harrowing day served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and awareness. It was a lesson that transcended my love for detective stories and thrust me into a reality where danger could take many forms. The embrace of my parents that day wasn't just a gesture of comfort. It was a lifeline to safety, a reminder that even in the midst of darkness, there were those who would protect and shield me from harm. The first day of school was finally here, and my heart was pounding with a mix of excitement and jitters. I put on my coolest superhero backpack and my comfiest sneakers, and my parents walked me to the school gates. Mum and Dad held my hands as we walked through the courtyard, my stomach swirling with a bundle of emotions. When the bell rang, Mom introduced me to my new teacher, Mrs. Thompson. She seemed nice, with a warm smile and a friendly voice. I looked around the classroom at the other kids, some with shy smiles like mine, and others with wide grins. The teacher led me to an empty desk, and Mom gave me a reassuring hug before leaving. As the day went on, we did fun activities, sang songs, and even had a story time. I started to make friends too, laughing and sharing stories during lunch. The school was big and bustling, and I felt like I was part of something exciting. During lunch, while I was chatting with my new buddies, a man I didn't recognize walked into the schoolyard. He was older, with a friendly face, but he stood out among all the parents. He headed straight toward me, and my heart skipped a beat. Why was this guy coming towards me? He squatted down to my level and smiled, making me feel a bit better. "Hey there, champ. I heard it's your first day of school. Your parents told me all about it. You know what? I've got a special back-to-school present for you in my car," he said, his voice all cheery. I looked at him, kind of surprised and kind of excited. A present? That sounded really cool. But then I remembered what Mom and Dad always said, never go anywhere with strangers. I hesitated, torn between wanting a present and knowing I shouldn't go. Just when I was about to make a decision, another parent who I recognized from the classroom orientation came running over. She looked worried, and I felt a little relieved that someone was stepping in. She put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Hold on a second." The lady gave the man a stern look, and I could tell something was off. She looked at me and asked if I knew him. I shook my head and told her I didn't. She smiled at me, but I could see she was still concerned. "Sweetie, I know your parents. They've been to the school a bunch of times. This man isn't someone you know, okay?" Before anything else could happen, the man's cheerful expression changed. He seemed really uncomfortable and quickly mumbled something before taking off in a hurry. The lady, who I found out was a parent of someone in my class, stayed with me until a teacher came over to make sure I was okay. I felt a mix of relief and confusion. What had just happened? Why did that man want me to go with him? I was so glad that the other parent had come to help me. Later, the teacher talked to everyone in the class about being safe and not going with strangers, even if they seem nice. When I got home, I told Mum and Dad all about it. They hugged me tight and said I did the right thing by not going with the stranger. I felt proud and a little braver after that day. I realized that even on my first day of school, I had to remember what my parents had taught me, to always stay safe and look out for myself. Just the other evening, I found myself at a bustling megastore with my two daughters in tow, one in elementary school, the other in middle school. Our mission was simple: grab some back-to-school supplies and maybe indulge in a few treats along the way. Little did I know that our outing would unravel into an unnerving experience. After a brief stop at the school supplies aisle, we rounded a corner and stumbled upon the Halloween candy display. The vibrant array of sweets caught our attention, and as we turned the corner, an older gentleman suddenly appeared, nearly colliding with our cart. Oddly enough, he seemed to be in a hurry and wasn't carrying any items himself. With a polite, "Excuse me," I paused in front of the candy, allowing my younger daughter to bombard me with questions about the candy pumpkins. While my youngest was immersed in her curiosity, the man came to an abrupt halt, oddly interested in the candies beside my daughter. His behavior was peculiar, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was listening in on our conversation. Things took a stranger turn when my daughter announced her desire to take a picture of the candy. The man's response was a twitchy, furtive glance in my direction. We moved on to the women's pajama section, momentarily brushing off the odd encounter. As I browsed, I couldn't help but notice the same man passing us by once more. This time, he was headed toward the shoe department, clutching an oversized bag of candy. My girls wandered off to the boys' clothing aisle, giving me space to make my decisions. As I caught up with them a few minutes later, I couldn't help but feel an uneasy prickle down my spine. The man was weaving his way through the boys' clothes toward my daughters. His behavior was bizarre. He appeared disoriented, almost lost, but his urgency was unmistakable. He hovered around us, seemingly preoccupied with picking out boys' clothing, yet his eyes kept darting toward us. I exchanged a meaningful glance with my older daughter, a silent agreement that something wasn't right. We decided to move on to the girls' clothing section. For a brief moment, the man disappeared from view. I allowed myself to think that maybe it was all just a series of coincidences, but as soon as we entered the girls' section, there he was again, pretending to scrutinize clothing as if he belonged there. Yet his true intentions seemed to be locked onto us. Each passing moment heightened my unease. It was as if he were watching our every move, taking furtive glances whenever he thought I wasn't looking. I confided in my older daughter about my suspicions, and she confirmed my fears. She had noticed it too. To ensure my daughter's safety, I decided to have my youngest join her sister in the shopping cart, a decision that might have saved us from something unthinkable. As I continued to monitor the man's actions, he suddenly exited the girls' section, passing so close behind me that it sent a chill down my spine. However, instead of disappearing, he circled back, maintaining a line of sight. His unsettling stare caught mine, and he twitched before reaching for his phone to send a message, then promptly left the area. By this point, my anxiety was in overdrive, my thoughts spiraling into the realm of paranoia. I scanned the surroundings and noticed two other men, slightly older, behaving strangely. One lingered in the electronics aisle, repeatedly glancing in my direction despite multiple obstructions. The other seemed to have a peculiar interest in girls' clothing, but his actions were suspiciously disjointed. In hindsight, I wish I had trusted my instincts sooner. The situation had taken a dark turn, and yet my determination to complete my pre-teens clothing shopping had clouded my judgment. I brushed aside the possibility that these occurrences were linked, that something more sinister was at play. With my girls at arm's length, we eventually moved to the women's section, leaving the unsettling atmosphere behind. Now, as I sit here in the quiet of the night, I can't shake off the chilling thought of what might have transpired had I not been vigilant. The echoes of that encounter still resonate, leaving me pondering the choice between paranoia and potential danger. Should I report this? Could a simple feeling of unease warrant any meaningful action? These questions gnaw at me as I grapple with the unsettling possibility that our routine back-to-school shopping excursion unveiled something far more sinister beneath the fluorescent lights of that store.